Hey guys, so a few of you over on my Instagram have been asking for an update on my gimbal setup. So now I'm shooting on the RS2. I've added a few bits to it to make shooting with manual lenses a lot easier. So last time I did a what's in my camera bag video, I think I was using Sigma lenses. I've now switched over to fully manual lenses like the Samyang VD-SLR. These are the Mark 1s, I believe. And also you can see mounted here the Sure 50mm full frame, that's an L mount, whereas these are Canon mount. So the main thing that most people ask me about is the 3D focus setup. So I've actually got here a long extender for the cold shoe, and that allows me to mount the 3D focus module even closer to the front of my lens, because what I was finding was when I mounted the 3D focus system in the cold shoe or the hot shoe of the camera, the angle of the 3D focus LiDAR beams weren't really hitting the center of the frame. So I found by bringing that forward, and I can actually just slide it backwards and forwards here, it gave me much better accuracy. So the thing with the 3D focus module is, whilst it works 100% of the time in terms of its focus accuracy, you need to remember that it only focuses on what's in the center of the frame. So by having it mounted in this fashion, it actually allows me to rotate it if I want to as well, if I'm doing something that's slightly off center. So that tends to work really well. It's actually mounted upside down as well, you'll notice. So that gives me the flexibility there to be able to slide it back and forth, and you could always put it on the top as well if you wanted to. Now this side handle is actually from the original Ronin. It actually came as a pair. I think it's called the DJI dual grip or switch grip, and I've mounted that just straight into the NATO rail on the side of the RS2. You can get it so you can have it with two hands, but I much prefer just having it with one in the center and one offside, so that I can then have a bit more stability and actually hold the camera in that way, and that way I can use my elbows to kind of tuck into my body a little bit, just to give me a bit more stability. I think if maybe you're using autofocus fully on a different camera, maybe you could have the dual handles and be able to move around like that. That's generally not the way that I tend to shoot. I tend to have just two hands like this and just hold it, and then I've still got access to the joystick and also the focus wheel as well. I've also mounted on the side here the focus wheel from the old Ronin. I don't really use that, but you can actually use the focus dial on the front of the RS2 to control things like your camera's ISO, if your camera is compatible. So it just gives me the option there to be able to choose if I want to use this one or this one for the focus. Mounted on this side handle, I actually have the smartphone adapter that came in the box for the RS2. That was the RS2 Pro Combo, which came with the Raven Eye and a few other little accessories as well. I personally don't use the Raven Eye. I found it a bit of a waste of time, not very accurate with tracking, and it's not something that I use very often as well, so that's basically just living in my drawer for the moment. And because I use an external monitor, instead of mounting my phone into that adapter, I've actually screwed in the Small Rig Magic articulating arm, which has been really handy because it allows me just to adjust the position of my monitor as I go. Quite often I'll be folding it upwards a little bit and having it resting on my body like that. Just that way I can get even more stable shots and be able to see my shots even in bright daylight. Monitor wise, I'm using the Atomos Shinobi and also the Ninja 5. I'm not really a huge fan of shooting RAW or shooting externally to SSDs. It's something that I have the option for, but to be honest with you, shooting internally to memory cards seems to be absolutely fine for me. I'm shooting in Vlog in 10-bit and in 4K or 5.9K. Because of the crop on the Lumix cameras at the moment, I am shooting in 30 frames a second, and I then slow it down to 25 frames a second, which means that I can slow my footage down by about 18–20%, and that way it gives me a little bit of a slower motion, but it still looks really natural. And I started doing that back in May last year, and I really like the look of it. I think it gives a bit more pace to my work rather than shooting in 50 frames a second and having everything in 50% slow motion. After shooting in 30, now when I look back at 50 frames a second, I find it a bit too slow. I'm always shooting with my LUTs preloaded onto my Shinobi. Because I tend to edit quite warm, it's helpful for me to be able to set my white balance by seeing what the end result is most likely to look like whilst I'm shooting. So that is a really good tip. If you've got a monitor that you can load your LUTs in, definitely do that, because it'll give you an idea of how things are going to look in post. So at the moment I have the S1H, the S1 and also the S5. I tend to just keep the S1H mounted on the gimbal already, just ready to go and shoot. I prefer it because when I connect my S1H to the gimbal with the USB and the HDMI, the screen on the back of the camera stays on, whereas on the S1 and the S5, that tends to cut out. I don't know if it's something to do with the capabilities of the camera in terms of how many outputs it can output to at one time. And I think when you've got HDMI connected and a remote trigger by USB-C, I think you're using up too many of the channels that the camera has to offer. So S1H, the LCD screen will stay on at the back even when you've got both of those connected. A lot of the lenses that I'm shooting with for video these days are Canon EF mount, including the Samyang or Rokinon, depending on which area of the world you live in, VDSLR lenses. I'm also trying out at the moment the Zine CF Cine primes as well, so there'll be a review of those later on this week. Because they're EF mount, obviously they don't fit natively onto Panasonic cameras or Sony cameras, so you're going to need to get yourself an adapter. So I've been using two adapters really depending on what lighting situation I'm shooting in. Traditionally, when you're shooting outdoors, you're going to want an ND filter that goes on the front of your lens. But I found an ingenious solution from Photodiox, which is this Canon EF to L mount adapter, which has a variable ND built in. So you're going to be having a variable ND filter built straight in between the lens and the camera body, which is really handy if you're shooting outdoors. You can just dial the strength that you want in. And that is great up until a point, because it's got a minimum of 2 stops of ND. As soon as it gets dark, sometimes I have to push the ISO up and my footage can get a little bit noisy. So then I switch it over to the Sigma MC21. Luckily they weigh pretty much the same, so in terms of actually swapping over on the gimbal, I don't really need to rebalance if I'm swapping from the Photodiox to the Sigma MC21. So if you've got an EF mount lens, you definitely want to get one of each of these. It's not cheap, but for the convenience of not having to change ND filters and carry them with you and take them on and off, I find it really easy. When it comes to using the 3D focus system, because the RS2 has got a built-in LCD screen in the back, which is a little touch screen, you can actually enable that by just clicking with your thumb AF or MF. So sometimes I'm going to be using the AF system with this, but then I might want to just quickly switch over to manual focus, and that's just as easy as swiping through the menus and tapping that on and off. So that's really simple to do. You can also turn it on and off by pressing the button underneath here. That's a little bit fiddly to reach sometimes, so I tend to just do it by the LCD. Also, if you have mounted a new lens and you want to just quickly calibrate the start and end points of the focus motor, then you can actually just double tap that hardware button on the front there, and that will run through a quick calibration cycle. So that's pretty much it. This is the RS2 Pro Combo that comes with the focus motor. It doesn't come with the 3D focus system though, that's an additional purchase, but it comes with all of the cables you need as well as the smartphone holder. Would definitely recommend getting some sort of side handle just so that you've got something to be able to balance your weight and be able to hold it, because I pretty much shoot on this all day at weddings, aside from my secondary angle, which is an S1 on a tripod. Really looking forward to the DJI releasing the Ronin 4D. For me, that's going to be combining all of this into one camera and gimbal and screen system, and because I'm hoping to do a lot of traveling this year, that's going to be really amazing for just packing everything down into one little case and being able to make my travels a lot easier. Doesn't mean I'm going to be moving away from Lumix though. I still intend on taking my S1 and S1H and probably my S5 with me as well, just for my secondary angles and any handheld stuff that I want to be going shooting. So yeah, that's a quick update from me. I hope you found this helpful. If you've got any questions about how I set any of this stuff up, please do leave a comment below and I'll get back to you right away. And if you want to keep an eye on what I'm doing this year, the best place to keep up with my work would be over on my Instagram, and I'll see you in the next one.